My name is Jared Seats. You're about ready to hear a talk on Splunk and FIPS, so stop looking so excited because this is FIPS. But before we begin, I'm supposed to get some kind of selfie or something. Apparently, it's what the cool kids do, and it's what I've been ordered to do. So, yeah, by my employer. So everyone smile. FIPS. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. All right, guys. So my talk's going to be about Splunk and FIPS. So first things first, everyone's favorite slide, the forward-looking slide. Anything I say, blah, 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 crystal ball and all that stuff. Just, if you think I make future-looking statements, just ignore them because they're not true. Maybe. Allegedly. What this talk will cover, this will talk Splunk and FIPS specifically. One note, this isn't the fun SSL talk that everyone may want in the future or wants today. This is just going to focus on FIPS and how it relates to Splunk. And the other thing that people should really keep in mind is this is not a talk about how to use FIPS in your environment. Your auditor could tell you one thing and you'll be like, no, this talk told me another thing. And your auditor's like, no, this is the way I want you to implement FIPS. And all your systems have to have it, yada, yada, yada. Just keep that in mind. If your end goal is to like have FIPS running with Splunk, that's what you got to do. So what is FIPS? It's, as it says, Federal Information Processing Standards. Splunk does 140-2. For 731, you can see the notes here. Universal Forwarder and Enterprise uses the embedded FIPS. It uses the OpenSSL module to get FIPS working with Splunk. So whenever you start Splunk up in FIPS, that's what it leverages to stay FIP compliant. But for us, the F in FIPS, because it's 4 letters, stands for fun. Because FIPS is such a joy to put on your systems. Has anyone ever used FIPS on their systems and had to like get Splunk running with FIPS? Raise of hands. Yes? No? No? Great. Kinda, maybe, yeah, right. Yeah. So one thing to keep in mind with FIPS, is you're just following, most of the time, for me, for Splunk PS stuff that I did, it was because they had to. Some auditor says they have to have FIPS running on their Splunk systems. They have to run it at a certain level, yada, yada, yada. Or they're like, it sounds like a great idea because it's FIPS and it's federal stuff, so let's just throw it on there. But like I said, there may be even more methods. Like someone was talking to someone on a golf course and told them how awesome FIPS is on Splunk, and there you go. You're just going to run your system in FIPS. Yeah, I heard about FIPS at a conference. This guy gave a talk, and it was great. But the basics on the FIPS is just using different ciphers and cryptography around it. It's just so whenever Splunk does communications with other systems, it meets a certain level. This is basic cipher. The example here is just like standard, like what the Caesar cipher. It's just moving over a couple letters. Very basic concept. Today it's more complicated. There's calculus algorithms that actually calculate where each letter should be, encrypts it, all that fun stuff. But this is the very basics on why FIPS is there. It's just to keep you from using lower grade ciphers.
FIPS is fraud 13.
What? Quite you. Also, when Splunk did its FIPS guidelines, it had to follow this process. And this is on Wikipedia, so if you don't believe me, you can go to Wikipedia and find this exact image that I stole. They basically send it to the lab, and then they get a report, goes to NIST, and then if it passes that, it goes back, and then they get this fancy certificate that they can put. And there's actually a PDF on Splunk's site that says, yes, we're FIPS compliant. We met NIST lab standards. We followed all the rules. We followed the procedures. We made sure nothing bad would happen. And then they get the little checkbox at the bottom. And then they can sell it saying, hey, yeah, we're totally FIPS compliant. Yes, it is expensive. It is very expensive to get FIPS compliant. But again, FIPS is fun. That's what the F stands for. But a few things with FIPS and Splunk you have to remember is you have to have FIPS running before your first start. I'll say it again. before Splunk is running, you have to make sure it's enabled with FIPS. FIPS has to be set up and running with Splunk before it does its first start. I say it because I've gone on multiple sites where they're like, yeah, we're running FIPS. Do a quick check. Nope, we're not running FIPS. It's not fun. We'll get into that later. But keep that in mind, everyone. The nice thing is if your Linux system is enabled in FIPS and Splunk can detect that, it'll automatically start in FIPS mode on its own, which is nice. But Windows, if your Windows system is running in FIPS mode, it apparently does not do that. The basics to get it running in FIPS mode, by the way, is you have to create this splunk-launch.conf file in your Splunk home, which is like C program files, Splunk default for Windows, ops Splunk, etc in Linux land or wherever you want it to live. You must set this variable Splunk_FIPS equals 1, just anywhere in the conf file. Again, for Windows, it's a little trickier because you have to use the CLI. You have to prevent it from starting. So I've got the command at the bottom. You basically, whenever you install it with MSI commands, if you don't do the launch Splunk equals 0, Splunk will start automatically, and you won't be able to get to FIPS mode. You basically have to start all over again. So keep that in mind. I would like to say again, on Windows systems, even if the Windows systems are in FIPS mode, that does not mean Splunk will run in FIPS mode. There's no auto magic there. It's really sad, and I've, again, multiple times, people are like, oh, our Windows are on FIPS mode, and I know Splunk runs in FIPS because, you know, I've seen the lab, I've done it in my Linux home system, and I'm sure Windows is exactly the same. It's not how it works for Windows. If you want to do a quick check to see if you are running in FIPS, in 7.2 they added a few neat features. You can do it via CLI commands. You can do a REST call, which is helpful if you have to check, you know, your several hundred node cluster. Or you could try to use search as well. I've seen mixed success for some reason on this, but they should all work the way you think they should. So this was like a quick example. Splunk is running, creates the private key, enabled FIPS cryptography module. That means you're running in FIPS mode when you install. Good job. So now we'll go to the I of FIPS. FI. I stands for intelligent. Because you'd be like, man, I can't believe I got this running in FIPS mode. I'm doing this government compliance thing, this 104-2, and I feel great about myself. And it's just perfect. That's why the I stands for intelligent in FIPS. So starting up, there's that CLI command I was telling you about. Admin, password, and then you see FIPS mode equals enabled. But if you see FIPS mode 0 or FIPS mode disabled, well, and you got your Splunk system running and you're like, I don't have FIPS mode enabled, but I'm sure it can't be that hard to get it enabled. So the first thing you need to do, especially if you have a running Splunk instance, is check the Splunk docs and, oh, yeah, look out how to back up your Splunk system. Why would you need to do that? Why would you need to, oh no. That's right, because if you're not running in FIPS mode in Splunk, you have to start over. You have to shut down, format, reinstall, doo-dah. Because Splunk cannot be run in FIPS mode unless it's done at boot time. Remember I said that a bunch of times at the beginning? Splunk has to be running in FIPS mode at start, first boot. So if it's not, you have to completely uninstall Splunk, check backups. Make sure those backups work too, by the way. Don't just assume that they work. I would actually test and check to see if you see configuration files in your backups. From personal experience from other people who I've seen not check their backups. But once you get Splunk working in FIPS mode, it looks just like regular Splunk. It's just normal Splunk. There's just magic going on in the backgrounds. Fun times. And when you're in FIPS mode, you're now starting to do the SSL certs because you have to. Because I don't know of anyone who just does FIPS mode and then they're like, oh, we use the default certs, it's fine. There's always like a requirement like, oh, we have to use like the DoD cert, or we have to use the special cert, we have to use third-party CA, we have to do something special. It's the exact same commands as the docs. I know everyone's like, oh, the docs are great. I can easily find the commands to do that. You have to dig in a little bit, but there's no difference between the normal Splunk and FIPS. I would just make sure you double check to make sure you're using like AES and you're not using like triple des. I had one client who used triple des when they were generating because Splunk Docs still has that apparently on one of their settings to generate the key with triple des, and they couldn't get the certs to work. Like, what's wrong? And it's like they went through they had to go through their history and look at all the stuff they typed out, and they saw that they, for some reason, they didn't use AES 256. They used triple des. So do that, but again, same command. Use the Splunk internal OpenSSL. I have seen some Splunk answers where they said that they used the Splunk internal OpenSSL and it didn't work, but I've used it and it worked after a few more tweaks and stuff that we'll get into. But now we're at the P for FIPS. So this talk's going pretty well, guys. We're now at the P, FIP, fun, intelligent, party. Because whenever you think of FIPS, it's always a party. You're having just a great time. You have your FIPS certs, and everything is great. I can just tell by all your guys' expression, you're like, whoo, FIPS, yes. So the other thing to keep in mind is that Splunk uses the OpenSSL FIPS module to create the FIPS certs. You can do a basic confirm with just go into your Splunk bin, Splunk CMD OpenSSL version, and this will tell you OpenSSL version. It's normally OpenSSL 1.2 FIPS. This was, I think, 7.3, and I tested this out recently. But if you want to use another OpenSSL, like you have your own updated version of OpenSSL, you have to do OpenSSL_FIPS equals 1 and set it as a export, and that'll get to work with your environment. Linux command, Windows commands, however you do that. Once you do that, you could create your own FIPS generated search using a different OpenSSL if you don't want to use the one that comes with Splunk. This is the default cert.conf, server.conf in 7.3.2 FIPS. If you check on Splunk's website, it's pretty much identical to normal Splunk gets this. There's no difference. The thing to keep in mind is the SSL versions that are required. It's limited to just 1.2, which everyone should be kind of doing anyway. But you might have a reason, like you have to have SSL 1.3 if you have older Splunk instances. I don't know if anyone's dealt with that, whereas I think 6.4, one of the Splunk instances, they upgraded the SSL because of Poodle. One of the SSL attacks that happened that year, there was like 7, but or 17. It was quite a few. But if you have that requirement, you might have to do like a non-FIPS Splunk somewhere, have them send there, and then send it to the FIPS compliant. But again, your auditor may cry at that, so keep that in mind. Yeah, they always do. Also, the other issue I've seen multiple times with FIPS, for some reason, the KIP Store crashes, fails to start, and this is the message you get. And it just tells you can't find a valid key under path, stanza, blah, 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 blah. And it just seems the KIP Store is still trying to use like default certs, and it can't read them for some reason. It's only in the FIPS environment. I haven't seen this in a non-FIPS Splunk instance. So for 2 of my clients, we did this and it worked, where we did the keys path, and this is in server.conf on the servers that's having this KIP Store issue. And if you go to the Splunk docs, it'll say keys path is deprecated. But if you put it in, it fixes your problem. These were the things, keys path and then keys path password is what we use. SSL password, we had the CA cert. Like, this was the configuration we used in another environment, and it worked, where they never had a KIP Store issue again, and it ran fine in FIPS. If you do some searching and you like look Splunk answers, or even the Slack channels, they'll be like, oh yeah, you don't need KIP Store, just disable the KIP Store. What are you going to use that for? You know, ES might need it, ES might require it, clustering might require that thing to work too. I'm not sure, but you might need to just fix it. And like I said, this worked for us. I had someone else try this on their instance, and it didn't fix it for them. So there might have been other issues. Yes, always back up your key store. Please, 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 please. Always back up the KIP Store. Other more troubleshooting. If you're in FIPS mode, make sure you're using the correct private key levels. I mentioned it before, but a bunch of people, they used like triple des without realizing it. They their policy is like they generated certs and they sent it to this black box, and then the black box sent the certs back, and it just wasn't working. Also, and this is from Splunk docs, they have to be in PEM format, so convert them the best way that you can. Windows, Linux, they have to be in PEM format. Again, double check that you are running in FIPS mode. And I would definitely check every server, because if you have like one server that's not, I've had that happen once where they had like a small cluster of servers and one of the servers was not in FIPS mode. And it took some digging, but they finally figured out that they weren't in FIPS mode. But again, if you're having issues, that would be the easiest thing to check, is just make sure Splunk is running in FIPS mode. Again, Splunk is running in FIPS mode. Not just your OS, but Splunk itself. The other thing to keep in mind is your Splunk apps. I mentioned one, DB Connect. Can't run in FIPS mode. If you have Splunk running in FIPS mode, DB Connect will not work. You go to their docs internally, you're looking for FIPS docs, it won't say anything. It'll just say, oh, some of the apps don't work. You actually have to go to the Splunk DB Connect app, look through the docs, and it says like in settings, it'll be like, DB Connect will not work on a Splunk server running in FIPS mode. And my best guess is because it uses some kind of hashing, normally MD5. It just uses, because it's just like, it's not critical to the success of that operations, and it was simple, so that's what they used, and it keeps it from using FIPS mode. In those scenarios, you would have to set up another Splunk server that's not running in FIPS mode, and Splunk's not running in FIPS mode, and install DB Connect there, so a heavy forwarder, for example. Use that to leverage data, and then send it to your Splunk servers that are running in FIPS mode. Your server can, Splunk can't. You have to make sure, so if you're Linux, you have to go in and make sure that you have Splunk FIPS equals 0, and so it doesn't start in FIPS mode. So it's like the opposite problem of the Windows guys. If you have to have it not running in FIPS mode, your Splunk system cannot. Again, it's just because of the way it does hashing for the backend. DB Connect's the easiest I found. I'm sure there's others. Normally, if there's some kind of like scripting, modular inputs, you might want to double check and make sure it actually works for FIPS, because it's possible it's not. And then you've got the joy of like telling your auditor why, yeah, Splunk's running in FIPS mode, except for that one. But we won't just that Splunk server is like out of bounds. It doesn't matter. Yeah, vendor dependency. So, and now the S for FIPS. We've all been waiting for it, because you're like, man, fun, intelligent party. What else could FIPS offer me that would be so great to like save it to the end of this presentation? It's a quote. Someone clearly lied to you. FIPS is none of those fun things. Quote me. Key takeaways from this, guys. So when you're running a FIPS, you should only really need to run FIPS if you need to. If there's some kind of requirement, if there's some kind of like policy that's telling you have to run in FIPS mode, it's not a magic bullet to make you auto-secure. You have a billion other things you need to worry about on wanting to secure your Splunk systems. FIPS is not it. FIPS is just to make sure you're using like crypto hashes that meet the government guidelines. And even then, you could probably go above that and be even more secure. But I digress on that point, because it would be more money for them if they had to do it again. So you also shouldn't underestimate it, because it'll break stuff. And it'll break stuff at the most inconvenient time. And it'll break stuff randomly. And it'll do it pretty much while you're alive. No matter what, Splunk and FIPS just, they get along, but not great. Again, if you have to use FIPS, use it. But if you don't have a hard requirement for FIPS, I would definitely dig into it and look into it on like why you think it's a requirement for your systems, because it will add more overhead to you than it will provide benefits. There's better ways to secure your systems, lock it down, than just saying, I run FIPS. Any questions?
How do you handle universal forwarder?
The universal forwarder of FIPS. Again, if same setup as the server, you can do Linux, it'll do it automatically. Windows, you will have to do a slow start or stop it from starting on its own, put in that config file, or add to that config file that one line, Splunk _FIPS equals 1, so it's active, and then start it before it does its first start. Because it follows the same rules and logic where if it's not fully started up the first time in FIPS mode, you have to completely uninstall it and then put it back in place. Thanks. Yes.
Have an example log snippet of a Splunk instance where it's not FIPS mode, but then you unintelligently try to force it into FIPS mode. Does it tell you, or does it just ignore it?
So the question was whether I had any examples of trying to start up Splunk in FIPS mode after it's been started on known. I think I've tried it before, but I don't have any evidence of that. I don't think it starts. I don't think it will start on its own. So it'll just like die. Like it won't start up at all. It's a good question. I need to dig into that some more. Any other questions? Yes.
The more important question is that what's enabling FIPS? You realize how lucky it is. You really saving it doesn't cause you to have to look at it. Just turn it off.
I've never seen that scenario yet. That's
What was the question?
so the question was he wanted to know if you could turn off FIPS after enabling it to see that you can start it. I believe you can, just because my Splunk by default would run without FIPS, and all the crypto should be fine. You may need to look into your settings because the settings may persist, but I haven't tested that either. So that's another thing I need to look into. All right. Anything else? Nope. All right. Thanks, everyone. Woo! FIPS. Love it.